Hey, it looks like we're almost there. Good afternoon or good morning if you're on the West Coast, and welcome to this webinar. My name is Jeffrey Stanton. I am one of the program directors for the Pathways to Enable Open Source Ecosystems program. And today I'm going to introduce a new solicitation, which is in the family of the POSE program. It's called Safety, Security, and Privacy of Open Source Ecosystems, or what we're calling Safe-OSE. And just a couple of housekeeping notes. I'm hopefully not going to talk for more than about 20 minutes, and that will leave hopefully ample time for questions and answers. We're going to use the question and answer feature of Zoom today. So we're not using chat, we'll be using the Q&A feature. So you can put your questions in the Q&A pretty much anytime you want, but I probably won't be able to begin answering them until the end of the presentation. So with that, we are going to begin. So everyone knows NSF. Congress established NSF in 1950, and its mission, as stated then, is to promote economic prosperity, national security, global leadership. And the three priorities that you see here are to strengthen NSF's research programs, investing in fundamental research, to broaden participation in science and technology, and to accelerate technology development and innovation. That is where the TIP Directorate comes in. In March 2022, NSF launched the TIP Directorate. It was NSF's first new directorate in 32 years. And TIP consolidates a variety of translation and lab-to-market activities that had been happening for a long time around NSF. TIP concentrates all of those in one directorate. The mission of TIP is to maximize NSF's impact by helping to advance critical and emerging technologies. So there are three primary goals shown here. First, cultivating innovation ecosystems throughout the US. Second, enhancing the translation of emerging technologies to market. And then creating partnerships that bring researchers and industry practitioners together to be able to pursue those efforts. So the new Safe-OSE program addresses all three of those goals with a primary emphasis on goals 1 and 2. So I'll just briefly remind you about the POSE program. The POSE program was conceived in 2022 as a translation mechanism and also as an innovation mechanism. So you have your typical strategies for commercializing products, and those find a home in our SBIR and STTR programs. Those help a product reach profitability, we hope. Instead, POSE focuses on creating self-sustaining ecosystems of developers and users around a particular open source project or product. The POSE program is not limited to software. Many of the projects that have been supported are software, but there are several that also focus on hardware or data and also on educational resources. So this new Safe-OSE solicitation emerges from the POSE program, but as a complement to it rather than a replacement or a substitute. The purpose of the Safe-OSE program is to address significant safety, security, and/or privacy vulnerabilities in mature, impactful open source ecosystems. So like POSE, the Safe-OSE program is product focused, meaning that funding is addressed to existing products or artifacts. And that funding, in the case of Safe-OSE, is meant to help address important vulnerabilities. I want to emphasize that last point about existing mature ecosystems. So this slide, the core diagram here is cribbed from the POSE program, because in the beginning we have at the middle there an open source product. And it just means that we have some original source code available. We may have some users, but on its own, there's minimal support for users or limited documentation. and very little infrastructure around it. For that product to thrive and continue over time, we need to have an ecosystem that surrounds it. So we want to promote the longevity and impact of that product by having an open source ecosystem. And that ecosystem handles governance, communication with the user community, support of the developer community, dispute resolution, resource management, and all of the other functions that you need in order to keep a project going. So the Safe-OSE program is predicated on the existence of one of these mature ecosystems and the product that that ecosystem helps to manage. So in some cases, we could have a thriving ecosystem around a product where over time it's accumulated security vulnerabilities, and those may be due to its architecture or implementation or the passage of time. And so a Safe-OSE award would provide funding to this open source managing organization in order to address those vulnerabilities. So things that we need a mature open source product that's already licensed for open source and in wide use, and it has a capable developer community. We need a capable managing organization that serves that community and also the user community. We need a clear-eyed analysis of the security vulnerabilities in that product, and then a realistic plan to address those vulnerabilities in 2 years or less. So you may be wondering why we are focusing our attention in the POSE program on security, safety, and privacy. And the driving force behind it, really two driving forces. One is the broad use of open source in all kinds of systems that we use on a regular basis. And the second one, which you see in this graph, is the growth in detected vulnerabilities in open source over time. You can see that it's a rather concerning growth rate. A lot of people are worried about this because much of our infrastructure is very highly dependent on open source. There are many of you I know who are familiar with the Log4j remote code execution vulnerability. It was very widely publicized, and it caught the attention of a lot of decision makers who influence how open source is used and developed. There's a lot of exposure that organizations have due to exploits in open source. And so Log4j is just one example of an exploit that's really raised awareness about how important it is to address vulnerabilities in open source. And so the goal of the Safe-OSE program is to help contribute to that for impactful open source products. In 2023, the White House published the National Cybersecurity Strategy, which, among other priorities, calls for investment in open source software to help proactively prevent attacks and to mitigate the risks that are posed by vulnerabilities in open source. Then the Cybersecurity and Infrastructure Security Agency, which is a component of DHS and which is responsible for coordination of cybersecurity across all levels of government, has created an open source software security roadmap and is actively involved in several initiatives to try to promote open source security. So when we were working on the solicitation for Safe-OSE, we were guided and inspired by this open source software security roadmap. So part of the takeaway from this lineage is that NSF intends to fund impactful open source ecosystems. That is, projects where proposers can make a convincing claim for national or societal importance of their open source products. So that leads us to a little bit of a closer look at what Safe-OSE project budgets will support. So those who are familiar with the POSE program might recognize this diagram as well. So we start with the assumption that the managing organization has become aware of many, if not most, of the vulnerabilities that may exist in the product. So these don't have to be code vulnerabilities per se. In fact, if there are known bugs in the product that represent possible security issues, and those bugs are straightforward to fix, the ecosystem should be already fixing those. That's not what Safe-OSE funding is for. Instead, the proposed project should focus on addressing complex, large-scale problems with security, privacy, and safety that normal developer operations in the ecosystem are not well positioned to address. So I'll give you a few examples, and these are really just meant to be illustrative, not to be like a complete list. So you can probably think of many things that might in fact fit the solicitation that are not shown here. So there could be some large-scale architectural issues that would require a wholesale rewrite of some module to address the underlying vulnerabilities, or there may be certain modules that really need to be written in a memory-safe language. Or maybe the product has dependencies on some abandoned or vulnerable code in other open source products. And some upgrades are needed to enable the safer use of dependencies. So again, these are just a few examples. The idea is that you have a mature ecosystem which has become aware that there are vulnerabilities that are beyond the capacity of your typical developer community to address. So having more of a fundamental shift in the security stance is what we are trying to achieve. So these are some quotes, if you will, from the solicitation. And, obviously I urge you to read the solicitation. It has a lot of useful details in it, but you should pay close attention to each of these when you're creating a preliminary proposal. So a project has to meet all of these criteria in order to be invited to submit a full proposal. You need to give clear evidence of the threat landscape for your product, show how your product fits into the big picture, perhaps by showing what other products are dependent on it. Need to provide a remediation plan, and one that can be accomplished in the 2-year award period. And overall, the plan should leave the managing organization and the product on a substantially better footing to be able to be more resilient to future attacks. So here's where I want to point out for the first time, Safe-OSE is not a research-oriented program. If you are planning a research project on open source security, I would suggest that you review the Dear Colleague letter. Its number is 23-149. It's from the SATC program, that is Secure and Trustworthy Cyberspace program. And that Dear Colleague letter specifically requests research proposals on open source security. So if you're interested mainly in research, the Safe-OSE solicitation is not the right place to be looking. So a little bit more about the structure of the program. These awards will be made as cooperative agreements, which, if you're familiar with NSF lingo, means that there are some more terms and conditions, some closer control of the agreements between the proposing organization and NSF. In year one of these awards, NSF will provide up to $500,000 in funding to cover a 12-month operational period. Now, right around the end of that first year, there'll be a reverse site visit and a review of the progress that the project has made. And then, based on the results of that review, a decision will be made whether to release the second increment of the cooperative agreement for year two. And then the agreement for year two would allow for up to $1 million of funding to cover the final 12 months of the award. So part of the rationale here is that it may involve some ramp-up period, some activities that need to go on to get the project up and running over that first year. So that's why there's a bit of an asymmetry between the first year and the second year of funding. I want to talk about eligibility a little bit for the solicitation. So pretty much the full range of organization types can propose to the Safe-OSE program. So this is not just for universities. This is for pretty much every organization type that you see here. They have to be US based. Now, if there are collaborations among two or more organizations as part of the proposal, one has to serve as the lead and the others will be sub-awardees. If you're familiar with the POSE program, it's exactly the same arrangement that we have in the POSE program. So no collaborative proposals. A single proposal has to be submitted. I've gotten a few inquiries already where the open source ecosystem managing organization is not incorporated yet. So if you recall that NSF only makes awards to organizations, all awardee organizations have to meet the federal requirements for appropriate financial controls. And there is a guide, by the way, on the NSF website for new awardees, which you might want to review. So if you're planning to incorporate between now and when proposals are due, in order that that new organization can propose to NSF, remember that you need to have a SAM registration and a unique entity ID before you can propose. And that can be a really lengthy process. So if you're not proposing from an existing organization, it's really important to get that work done well in advance of the first proposal deadline. So who may serve as a principal investigator? So for universities, any co-PI or senior personnel could be a faculty member, primary full-time paid appointment in a research or teaching position, and then a new category which has also been added to the post solicitation, and that is a staff leadership role in an open source program office, which an increasing number of universities have. So the typical restrictions against funding internationally apply to the Safe-OSE program. So if you have questions about that, the PAP guide does describe the fact that NSF rarely funds international organizations or individuals. So here's the proposal timeline, which you may be interested in planning ahead for. The upcoming preliminary proposal deadline is January 14th. So that's about 3 months away from today. Preliminary proposals to this solicitation have not all of the elements of a typical proposal. So you will need a cover sheet, your one-page project summary, a project description, which maxes out at 5 pages, a references cited section, and letters of collaboration up to 5. And those will be uploaded as supplementary documents. So the letters of collaboration do not have to conform to the standard format that's shown in the PAP guide. In fact, we want those letters of collaboration to be no more than 2 pages and on letterhead. They shouldn't be that boilerplate that the PAP guide gives. They should really describe in some detail how each letter writer has been involved in the project and why they believe that the project is a very important activity to accomplish. So we want people who really can attest to the importance of what you're planning to do. So now after a review of the preliminary proposal, which we're hoping to get done quite quickly, NSF will issue a binding decision to invite or not invite a full proposal. So in this situation, a binding decision means that a full proposal will only be accepted if the corresponding preliminary proposal received the designation of invite. So the invited full proposals will then be due on April 22 of next year. So that's a pretty short window between January and April. And the project descriptions for these have the typical limit of 15 pages. There are a fair number of required elements of the full proposals, so make sure that you pay attention to the proposal preparation instructions in the solicitation so that you can remember to submit all of the required elements. So I just want to talk a little bit about the preliminary proposal merit review criteria. There are 7 of them in all, and then the first 4 are here. These are in addition to the standard NSF review criteria, intellectual merit, and broader impacts. So these first 4 that you see here are crucial because they make the case for why your proposed Safe-OSE award might be appropriate for your managing organization and your particular product. So one way you might want to frame this, if you're familiar with the POSE program, is to imagine that you have a successful POSE phase 2 project that has come to completion. So it's at the end. So you've got a capable managing organization, you've got a sustainability model, you've got a robust community of developers. Yet the product that you're working on could be even better if it was safer, if it was more secure against vulnerabilities. And so the Safe-OSE award would help you continue to address those major vulnerabilities with important developments that would put you on a safer stance with respect to safety, security, and privacy. So the other 3 criteria are here. They're complementary to what I previously mentioned. You still have to fit all this within the 5-page limit, which I know is not going to be easy. So the preliminary proposal has to make the case that your team is the best team to do this work, and that NSF funding will provide the critical kind of leverage that's needed to complement however the managing organization normally does its business, and that there are interested parties who have a stake in helping this product to become safer and more secure. Getting down into the weeds here, some budget requirements. The proposal budget is similar to the way you'd structure a POSE phase 2 award. So it's 2 years with a maximum of 1.5 million. That budget asymmetry that I mentioned before, because you'll have some ramp up activities in the first year budget's limited to $500,000. And then in the second year, assuming that your project evaluation goes well, second year will be $1 million to finish the project. The solicitation has some of the aspects of the review in it. And then if you are recommended for an award, there will be details shown in the terms and conditions that will spell out all the requirements for a successful progress review at the end of the first year. Note that like POSE budgets, there's a lot more documentation required for travel requests, equipment requests, consultants, and so forth. It's not like a usual research award where you can say that you're going to go to a conference. We're requesting a lot more backup documentation. That does take some time to put together, so start early. So we're coming near the end here. How do you apply? I've shown the numbers of the current solicitations here. The POSE solicitation actually has a deadline for phase 1 proposals coming up on the same January 14th deadline. But if you're applying to Safe-OSE, you'll be preparing a preliminary proposal of 5 pages and submitting that by January 14th in response to NSF 24608. So that's pretty much everything I wanted to talk about to get started. And how did I do? Not too bad.